Welcome to the Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture Series. At the end of each slide, there will be a 5-second delay. Use this time to complete your notes. When you are done, push play and move on to the next slide. This presentation will begin in 5 seconds. Welcome to Virginia Civics and Economics Lecture 3.4 on voting in the United States, and it's time to get out the vote. You know, it's our civic responsibility. We've all heard it before. Bad politicians are elected by good people who don't vote. So get out there because every vote counts. Well, does your vote really count? Are there times when every vote doesn't count? And if that's the case, does everyone in America vote at the same rate? Well, today we'll answer those questions, and with that said, go to the next slide. You learned way back in Unit 1 about the requirements for being able to vote, and you also learned that voting is a civic responsibility. But who actually votes in the United States? Well, there are 3 factors in predicting which citizens will vote: education, age, and income. Now, I've put a lot of information out there and you can read it, but it boils down to this. People who are highly educated, older, and have a higher income tend to vote more than people who are less educated, younger, and have less income. So this is the deal about who votes. And there are other factors. Those factors include gender, race, marriage status, and even religious attendance. All these things will predict who actually votes regularly in the United States. Go to the next slide. Whoa, wait a minute. You're telling me only 35 to 40% of people actually regularly vote in this country? We were all told that voting was a right. I had to be in a civics class to find out it was my responsibility. Well, why do citizens fail to vote? There are 4 reasons. There is a lack of interest. Citizens are bored with politics, the issues do not impact them, or they are cynical of the system. Or in other words, there is a combination of who cares and so what. Then, citizens fail to register. They are too busy, do not care, or have no confidence in government. In other words, you can't vote unless you actually went and registered to vote. Then we have something that's a bit controversial. Virginia identification voting laws require voters to provide an acceptable photo identification and state their full address to the polling workers. Well, people are saying that suppresses the vote. We know this may discourage voter turnout by up to 2%, but studies on the issue are not conclusive. Finally, the percentage of voters who participate in presidential elections is usually greater than the percentage of voters who participate in state and local elections. That's great that we all go and vote for the president, but this is what happens on a local level. Just look at the daily press. One candidate has 11,608, the other candidate has 11,607, and then the candidate with 11,607 votes had one more vote counted as valid. This ended in a tie, and it was decided by a coin toss. Every vote counts on a local and state level. Go to the next slide. Every vote counts on a state and local level, but is that true for the national level? We're all voting for president, right? But does our vote really count the way we think it does? Well, to answer that question, we need to look at the Electoral College. A slate of electors. These are people who will actually elect the president for each state is chosen by popular vote. And except in Maine and Nebraska, states use a winner-take-all system, where the winning party of the popular statewide vote selects who will serve as an elector. What does all of this mean? It means that when I go to vote, I am voting for who I want as president of the United States. But I'm not voting for President of the United States. I'm only voting for who will represent my state when the state votes for President of the United States of America. Think that's goofy? Check this out. The electors meet in their state capitals to vote for president and vice president, and the results are counted and certified by Congress under the 12th Amendment. If no candidate receives 270 votes, then the president as voted by the House and vice president as voted by the Senate are chosen by members of Congress. What? That's right. Not only are we not voting directly for president, but if these electors can't figure out who's going to be president by coming up with 270 votes for one person, Congress decides who's going to be president of the United States. And then, electors do not have to vote for the candidate chosen by the people unless they are pledged to vote for a particular candidate or are required to vote a certain way by state law. So we might vote for this elector, and that elector might get ready for his Electoral College vote, and then that elector might change his mind. But honestly, people almost never change their vote. You see, these electors are very loyal party members, and they have probably been put in this position because of how much work they've done for the party. Well, why have an electoral college? The Electoral College count often exaggerates the true margin of victory for the winning candidate when compared to the popular vote. So, the blue party had won with a landslide victory, but in reality, it might have been an Electoral College landslide, but they might have only won the popular vote by 50 or 51%. And then there's this. The popular vote does not determine who wins the presidency, and because of this, there are instances where the candidate won the popular vote but did not win the presidency. It happened in 1876, 1888, 2000, and 2016. So, your vote doesn't count? Well, because of the Electoral College, some people feel this way. Go to the next slide. Now that you understand the complexity of the Electoral College, you need to see the impact of the Electoral College on presidential politics. The winner-take-all system leads presidential campaigns to target densely populated states for campaigning, although candidates must pay attention to less populated states whose electoral votes may make the difference in tight elections. This is the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania has a lot of electoral college votes, so it is heavily targeted by both political parties during a presidential election. Pennsylvania and its voters get a lot of attention every 4 years. Well, why does Pennsylvania get so much attention? The number of electors in each state is based on the size of the state's congressional representation, which is based on the state's population. So, for example, in Virginia, we get 13 votes because we have 11 members of the House of Representatives and 2 members of the Senate. And that's based on the fact that we have about 8 million people who live in Virginia. Because of this, the votes of citizens in states with smaller populations carry more weight than the votes of citizens in states with larger populations. And the votes of citizens with larger populations are diluted per electoral vote. They count less than the votes of citizens in smaller states where they are concentrated per electoral vote. They count more. In other words, these two folks in Wyoming, where not a lot of people live, have more power when electing the President of the United States than this surfer who lives in California, which is one of the most heavily populated states in the Union. And then there's this. The requirements for a majority vote to win in an electoral college favors a two-party system. No third-party candidate has ever won the presidency of the United States. The closest a third-party candidate got to win an election was Theodore Roosevelt. He only received 88 Electoral College votes, and he had already been president once and was a very popular president. That's it for this lecture, and I look forward to seeing you in class.